Hello, my name is Taylor Fulton, and I am the Director of Marketing for Small Business Matters. Today, I am very pleased to announce that my dad, Tim Fulton, has published a new book titled The Meeting. The Meeting is now available on Amazon as well as our website, smallbusinessmattersonline.com. Recently, my dad sat down with Cindy Miller from Cindy Miller Communications to discuss the meeting and why meetings are so important to small business owners and executives. Let's take a look.
So Tim, start off by telling us, why did you write the book? What prompted you to write The Meeting?
Okay. Well, thank you, Cindy, and I'm really happy to be with you here today. I've written two books before. I wrote a book called Small Business Matters, and then a second book called Small Business Matters and All That Jazz. Both those books were collection of articles I'd written in the past, essays that I'd written before, mainly from my newsletter. And I thought I wanted to do something different. And different this time was writing a story about what I've been really passionate about for many years, and that was facilitating, chairing peer group, Vistage groups. Mm-hmm. And I retired from Vistage 2 years ago after being a chair for 16 years. And I've chaired over 600 meetings. And when I think of that number, it's mind-boggling. And over 200 members that I worked with, 7 different groups. And so a lot of experience working with a lot of different people in these executive peer groups. And I thought that might be an interesting story, because oftentimes I would get non-members, spouses, friends, colleagues who would ask me, so Tim, what happens in these Vistage meetings? What occurs? What happens behind the curtain, so to speak? And there just seemed to be intrigue about what happens when a group of CEOs get together for a day and talk about not only business, but just kind of talk about life in general. Mm-hmm. And as far as I knew, there had never been a book written about this experience, this peer group experience. And so that's essentially why I wrote the book.
So this one is different than your other books. I've read your other books, and this one really does follow a group of characters, tell a story. Some people in your world might recognize some pieces of the stories that are out there. So how did you develop these characters? How did you create the story around the meeting?
Yeah, you're right. This book is very different in that it's what's I think referred to as business fiction. Mm-hmm. And I love these types of books. Patrick Lencioni, one of my favorite authors, has written a number of best-selling books that they're written as stories with really good content embedded in the story and great characters. And so when I went about writing this book, I thought, well, I could just make up some characters, or I could just take the members that I have worked with, some of, and change their names, change their stories a little bit. And I don't think I could make up anything better than what I've actually experienced. So the main characters in the book are actual real members that I've worked with, change the name, right, to protect the innocent. But these are real stories from real CEOs. And they are, in my story, they're the heroes. I've been very lucky to work with them as their guide, as their guru, as their facilitator. But the heroes in my story are my members. They've got really difficult jobs. And you know that. You work with CEOs of companies. And so I feel like I've been very privileged to work with them. And what's interesting is that they all have essentially the same issue, the same problem that they have figured out at some point. And that is they can't do it by themselves as much as they'd like to, as much as they'd like to be able to just, fix their problems and grow their companies all by themselves. At some point, most of them figure out that they can't do it by themselves. And that's what draws them into a peer group like a Vistage group, where they see the advantage of having not one or two, but a dozen or so other really smart, growth-oriented business owners, helping them address their issues, their problems. And again, lucky I get to serve as their guide as this kind of process mm-hmm. takes place.
Mm-hmm. So you described yourself as a Vistage chair, And most of us who know you in that world, you've also are just kind of the ultimate business coach. And you've been coaching people in Vistage, people outside Vistage. You've been coaching different levels of executives. So how does this book and reading those of when people read the meeting, how's it an extension of your coaching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. That, over time, I was very lucky that I got involved with Vistage and got the opportunity to form these groups and to facilitate all these different meetings. And it has been an extension of the coaching and counseling that I've done over time. And, what I figured out over time, certainly didn't get it on the first meeting, was that there are a handful of key ingredients that go into a successful meeting. And number one is having the right people, having the right people in the room, the right members. And I was very lucky that to some degree, some members just kind of fell into my lap. Some others, I was just fortunate that they were able to join my group when they did. But getting the right people, right experience, right backgrounds, right growth mindset. So number one is getting the right people in the room. The second is getting the right agenda. I have a pet peeve, and that is that every meeting should have an agenda. Mm-hmm. And I've been guilty of holding a meeting without an agenda, and those meetings usually go terribly badly. And so I've learned over time that one of the important ingredients in a meeting is having the right agenda, the right structure. Are we talking about the right stuff? And so that's an important ingredient. I also think a third ingredient in a successful meeting is having the right leader, the right facilitator, the right guide. And again, I learned over time, having attended many meetings, some good, some awful. And from that, I tried to learn, okay, how do I go about facilitating a meeting? And maybe my best teacher for that was my mom, Dorothy, who asked better questions than anyone on the planet of me, always. And from that experience, I picked up on asking questions and asking more questions. And it just kind of, the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn more. And I've read books and books on asking questions. So, having the right leader is important. And then, Cindy, the fourth component, and maybe the most interesting for me in terms of a great meeting, is some element of drama, some element of conflict. I mean, if you think of the best stories you've ever read or the best movies you've ever seen, it's usually because of that conflict, that drama, the conflict between good and evil, between young and old, left and right, that inherent conflict that keeps us tuned in to the story. I think the same thing is true in a meeting. What keeps people tuned into a meeting is some sense of drama, sense of conflict, that this member is up against the biggest challenge they've ever faced, and we're going to try to figure out a way for them to get past it. And so I found that the best meetings that I have ever been a part of, particularly within Vistage, was when there was this element of conflict and drama, and the group found a way to overcome those obstacles. So those are the four most important ingredients of a good meeting. And in the book, I kind of try to embed all four of those as much as possible.
So you and I are both big readers. I'm sitting here in the middle of a bunch of books. You're sitting there in the middle of a bunch of books. And I'm guessing you've got some business books on your desk, just like I do. So with all of the choices out there for the endless choices of business books, what makes the meeting stand out?
Wow, that's a great question. What I hope will make it different, will make it unique, is the fact that it is told as a story. This idea of a business fiction that not only contains good takeaways, good content, but also tells a compelling story. I think that makes it different, being able to do both of those, to navigate both of those. I also think the fact that the entire book is about one meeting, one day in the lives of these CEOs, again, looking behind the curtain in terms of what happens in this meeting and what do they say and what do they do and what are the issues that come up. So just being able to take just a kind of a snapshot of a one-day peer group meeting, I think makes it different. And then the idea, a lot of business books, like you mentioned, are very prescriptive. And a lot of the writing that I do, over time has been very prescriptive. The 5 ways to do this and the 6 ways to do this. And I tried very intentionally not to be so prescriptive in this book, and to have the content not come from me, but to come from the members, as they interact with each other. So I think readers of the book, while they'll get handed, I think, some good takeaways, the delivery of that content, I think, is very different in this book.
Okay, great answer. Go back to a point you made a few minutes ago, and you talked about the value of the group and the value of the meeting, basically. So does that mean, and go beyond a yes or no answer, but does that mean everybody should find a group? And why should they find a group?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with the easy answer first. The easy answer is no. That the peer groups, I don't think, are for everyone, and that's difficult for me to say, because I would love to see everyone be a part of a peer group, a mastermind group, a Vistage group. And yet what I learned over time is that they're not for everybody. That I think there are certain qualities that make some people a better fit. They're not good or bad, but certain qualities that make some people a better fit for these groups than others. And when I think about that, I mentioned Patrick Lencioni earlier, one of my favorite authors. One of his most recent books is entitled The Ideal Team Player. And he identifies, what are the most important characteristics of a great team member? And there are 3 characteristics that he identifies. And when I think about a great Vistage member, I could not describe this any better. One, he says humility, somebody who understands that they're not perfect, they're even not near perfect, they're only human, and make mistakes all the time and have blind spots, and just humble even in their greatest success. The second thing he describes is hungry, is a hunger for learning, particularly a hunger for growth. Great book, Mindset, written by Dr. Carol Dweck, and she talks about this idea of mindset, and I know you're familiar with it, that some people are growth minded and some aren't. Again, not good or bad, but I found my best members had a hunger, had an appetite for learning more and more and more, and so I think that's important. And then the third component that Lencioni talks about is humility, hunger, and smart. Mm-hmm. And when he talks about smart, he doesn't talk about IQ smart. He talks about people smart, emotional intelligence. I think people would recognize the ability to get along with other people, to understand other people, to empathize with other people. That's the smart that he's referring to. So if I could draw a picture of a perfect Vistage member or peer group member, it would be those 3: be humility, hunger, and smart.
So when you, so if you're, I hear what you're saying, that not everybody is a good fit for a group. So how would someone who's not in a group leverage the book, The Meeting?
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you asked that, because I think that one, they'll enjoy the story. 2, that they will find, in the book, there's a whole chapter on exit strategy. Mm-hmm. And the steps towards exit strategy. There's a whole chapter on dealing with difficult employees and the different tactics and strategies for dealing with difficult employees. There's a whole chapter on business partnerships. Business partnerships are like human partnerships, marriages that more than 50% of them don't last. And so there's a whole chapter on a business partnership and how to work one's way out of a business partnership. So even if they're not interested or not a good fit for a peer group, I think there are a number of key takeaways for any small business owner that would make it well worth their time.
Okay. So when someone reads the book, just in your imagination, mm-hmm. The book's about to be available, everyone will have access to it. So what do you imagine that a reader will say to you after they read this book?
One, I hope in a small way, with a not a big T but a little T. Thank you, because this was a difficult book to write, and you know that. And it took me 2 years, and I started and stopped and started and I stopped. And for whatever reason, I kept going. And so I guess that one is just a bit of gratitude. Second is that I think what would they say, that I have faced some of these issues myself. Mm-hmm. And now I've got maybe a different path, that I hadn't thought about this, and you talked about, you wrote about this, and now I've got maybe a better context to making some of the decisions that every small business owner has to make at some point. So I think the insights for a business owner, I hope they'll find valuable. A third is for anyone who finds themselves in a position of facilitating group meetings, mm-hmm. whether it's the owner of a business or the head of the PTA at the local school or a pastor at a church, because I do take a good amount of time in the book talking about facilitation, meeting facilitation. So I hope from that perspective that there'll be some helpful takeaways in terms of how to manage a group, how to manage a meeting itself.
Well,
so that's what I would hope.
Well, good. You've done a great job of teasing the book. So let's do one thing before we wrap up, because you also, in addition to your coaching and to your books, you have a podcast called Small Business Matters Online. And you like to blindside your guest with a rapid fire question at the end. So I think turnaround is fair play here. So let's close with rapid fire.
All right, go ahead.
So what's the one, okay, you can't use your books, but the one book everyone should read?
The E-Myth, Revisited by Michael Gerber.
Okay. What are you looking forward to in 2021?
Looking forward to returning to my Small Business Matters conference. We took last year off for all the right reasons, and yet I miss putting on the event. I miss seeing people. So I'm hoping in May of next year, there'll be a Small Business Matters conference. Okay.
And like all of us, our life has been different since about on or around March 13th. Mm-hmm. So what is one pandemic reality or pandemic habit that you started that will live on with you?
My kids kid me about this, Cindy, and I could turn my camera and you'd see it. I have a bench out in my front yard, and I will spend a good amount of time every day when I've got some free time, just sitting on that bench, just watching people. We have traffic going by and mm-hmm. people walking by and pets walking by. But something that I didn't do before that I've found that I enjoy is just a little bit of quiet and a little bit of fresh air. And sometimes I'll take my reading out there, but so I just enjoy sitting out on my bench in the front yard, as crazy as that sounds.
That is a great image, though, and a great image to close out on. So thank you, Tim.
You're welcome, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this short interview. And thanks again to Cindy Miller and her team at Cindy Miller Communications for helping us promote our new book, The Meeting. Again, you can find The Meeting on Amazon, as well as our website, smallbusinessmattersonline.com. We hope you enjoy the new book and, of course, welcome your feedback. Thank you.